Welcome back to the channel, guys, and thanks for all the love on our Evil Dead videos, both new and old. Today we're getting into one of the most iconic villains of the franchise, who also happens to be its hero. By the time Ash Williams stumbles into the year 1300, landing in the realm of Lord Arthur and his knights, he's already been to hell and back. This is not an exaggeration, by the way. He's watched his friends turning into cackling ghouls in a remote cabin, chopped off his own possessed hand and replaced it with a chainsaw, watched his girlfriend become possessed, and even been forced to kill her. As if that wasn't enough, he's also been sucked through a swirling vortex into the Middle Ages, all thanks to that one cursed book he never should have gone near. You know the one. He's fought more Deadites than almost anyone in the franchise, and yet, after all of that, one of the most dangerous enemies Ash ever faces isn't some ancient demon or the walking, talking dead hanging around in a cellar. It's him. It's his own face, his own swagger, and his own body, turned rotten, hateful, and pointed straight back at him. That's Evil Ash, Bad Ash. Uncreative names, maybe, but they get the point across. This doppelganger claws his way out of Ash and goes on to command an entire army of the dead as its leader. In this video, we're dissecting him properly. How exactly is Evil Ash created, step by grotesque step? What makes him fundamentally different from your standard issue Deadite? And what do his body, powers, and behavior actually tell us about the Necronomicon, the nature of the curse, and the line between Ash the hero and Ash the tyrant, which is way thinner than you'd think? Let's put the Deadite King on the slab. Windmill of Madness, birth of a necromantic doppelganger. Evil Ash's birth, if you can call it that, is one of the strangest and most inventive creation sequences in horror, and it starts with a mirror. In Army of Darkness, the third entry in the franchise, Ash takes shelter in an abandoned windmill while fleeing the evil force pursuing him through the haunted forest. Inside, he encounters his own reflection and the mirror is shattered. From those broken shards emerge the mini-Ashes, a swarm of tiny duplicates of himself, each one a cackling miniature of Ash. I know, weird, but let's ask the question we need to ask. What are these little ashes? The film never gives us a precise biological or supernatural explanation. However, they appear to be manifestations of the same evil force that creates possessions and distorts throughout the franchise, using Ash's reflected image as a template. Instead of inventing a completely new, demented shape, the evil copies what's already there. They behave exactly as you'd expect a horde of malicious miniature Ashes to behave. They torment the original mercilessly, poking him with a fork, dropping a bucket on his head, and driving a nail through his shoe. It's pure Three Stooges style slapstick comedy, and then it turns into body horror. What follows unfolds in three distinct stages. First, infection. The mini-Ashes knock Ash unconscious, tie him down Gulliver style, pinch his nose shut, and send one brave little clone diving straight down his throat. Talk about swallowing literal evil. Second, we get the mutation. Ash tries to kill the thing squirming inside him the only way he can think of, by drinking scalding water. Instead of solving the problem, it only adds to his suffering. Soon afterwards, an eyeball bulges obscenely out of his shoulder. Whatever has entered him has taken root and is growing. The third and final stage is division. As Ash staggers through the woods, a full-sized duplicate begins to bud from his body before splitting away as a complete and independent being. Evil Ash isn't summoned from some distant location. He physically emerges from Ash's own body, and if anything in the franchise perfectly captures the combination of necromancy and grotesque biology, it is the creation of Evil Ash. The clone wastes no time, and the differences are instant and unmistakable. He introduces himself as Bad Ash, sneers at the original as a goody little two-shoes, and breaks into a mocking little jig before attacking him. His voice is snide, his expression is filled with pure malice, and his personality is immediately recognizable as Ash's own confidence twisted into something cruel. Notice, though, that at this exact moment, he isn't yet the skeletal warlord he later becomes. Sorry, spoilers! He is still human-looking, or at least as human-looking as a supernatural duplicate grown from another man's body can be. His transformation into the decaying Deadite general is a later stage. Right now, in the windmill shadow, he is the freshly created evil twin, getting used to his surroundings, understanding who he is, and declaring his purpose. First duel, improvised grave. Why a simple burial isn't enough. Ash's response to his new twin is typical. He's blunt, decisive, and perhaps a little too confident about what he's dealing with. After Bad Ash delivers his taunts and performs his little jig, Ash pulls out his shotgun and blasts the double at point-blank range. Look, this isn't his first rodeo. He knows what to do. Then, applying the lesson that the previous entries have drilled into him, he takes the chainsaw to the body and dismembers it, because by now he knows that a single killing blow does not always keep a Deadite down. Dismemberment is his hard-won rule of thumb. So far so good. But then he makes the mistake that sets up the rest of the film. He digs a grave near the windmill, dumps the pieces inside, and treats the whole affair as finished. It doesn't occur to him that this isn't an ordinary corpse or even necessarily an ordinary Deadite. Ash is handling Evil Ash like a problem that can be solved with a gun, a saw, and some dirt. He has no idea whether the double's connection to the supernatural force can be severed so easily. The film's visuals warn you as clearly as they can without spoiling what comes next. Evil Ash's severed head rolls out of the burlap sack and warns Ash that he will return before Ash ever gets the book. Ash responds by throwing dirt over its face and continuing with the burial. The audience realizes it before Ash does. This thing might not stay down. As if Ash's attempt to dispose of the clone wasn't already risky enough, it is Ash who eventually causes his return. At the cemetery, while retrieving the Necronomicon, Ash is supposed to recite the protective words, Klaatu Barada Nikto, before removing the book. He forgets the ending, mumbles, and coughs his way through the last part, and grabs the book anyway. That mistake awakens the army of the dead. Evil Ash's dismembered body rises from its grave and reassembles itself, while skeletons begin clawing their way out of the earth around him. Evil Ash is back, and this time he has changed. He is no longer merely the relatively human-looking comic doppelganger from the windmill. He is now a lopsided and visibly decaying version of Ash, progressing towards the skeletal warlord who will command the siege. The transformation has begun. Human-looking double, resurrected corpse, then necromantic commander of the dead. From clone to commander, Evil Ash as Deadite King. I can already see the gears turning in your heads. Why does Evil Ash get to be the general? A graveyard full of Deadites rises with dozens upon dozens of skeletal soldiers clawing their way out of the earth, and yet it's this one specific double who takes command of all of them. Why? The film never gives us a formal rule explaining why Evil Ash becomes their leader, but one interpretation is tied to the prophecy driving the story. Ash is believed to be the Promised One, the hero foretold in the Necronomicon, who will fall from the sky and deliver humanity from the Deadites. Evil Ash is the doppelganger of that Promised One, making him the dark reflection of the chosen champion. If the real Ash is destined to lead humanity, then his corrupted copy becomes the perfect figure to lead the dead. He is essentially the anti-Ash, built from the same face, voice, confidence, and instincts, but aimed in the opposite direction. Also, forget what you think about armies made of the dead, because the army here is no disorganized mob stumbling around without purpose. The Undead Legion is structured like a medieval fighting force, and Raimi puts clear care into assembling this infernal horde. There is skeletal infantry marching in ranks with swords and shields. There are mounted soldiers riding skeletal steeds. There are siege elements including ladders, catapults, and battering rams thrown against the castle walls. There are also winged Deadites, one of which abducts Sheila, a woman from Lord Arthur's kingdom who has become close to Ash. Evil Ash rules over it all, and he isn't a silent overlord who simply broods and occasionally barks out an order. He has Ash's own theatrical streak turned toxic and cruel. He taunts, he gloats, he struts before his troops, he issues orders with a showman's flair. Essentially, he has a personality. He's probably the campiest villain in the franchise, and the best comparison might be Skeletor from He-Man. Fun fact, Ash Williams and Skeletor both appeared as operators during Call of Duty 2023's Haunting event. Back to Evil Ash and his army, there's real discipline in the way the soldiers move under him, but there's also cruelty and dark humor. That unmistakable Ash-like quality turned into villainy. He captures Sheila, forces himself on her, and later appears with her after she has been transformed into a Deadite consort. He uses her transformation to hurt the real Ash emotionally. War is more than brute force, it's also about preparation and psychological warfare, and Evil Ash excels at both. You can't help comparing Evil Ash's behavior with that of standard Deadites, which is often chaotic, sadistic, and gleefully disorganized, with individual creatures doing individually horrible things. Evil Ash has intelligence, patience, a strong personality, and a battle plan. Without him, they're a horde causing chaos. With him at the helm, they're an army prepared to fight an organized war against the forces of the living. That's why he's their king. Deadite biology versus Evil Ash. What makes him so special? To appreciate how special Evil Ash is, we first have to go into what your standard Deadite actually is. I'll remind you of the basics. A Deadite is generally created when an evil supernatural force possesses or overtakes a living or dead body, granting it superhuman strength, brutal durability, freakish movement, resistance to ordinary damage, and an endless hunger for torment. The generic Deadite combines possession, power, and cruelty, while frequently using the memories of its host body to taunt the people who knew that person. Evil Ash shares many of those characteristics. He is supernaturally strong, he survives damage that would kill a normal person several times over, and he taunts and torments his enemies exactly like his lesser kin. At a fundamental level, he displays many of the same traits associated with possessed bodies throughout the franchise. But then come the differences, which are significant enough to put him in a category of his own. First and most strikingly, he has a consistent and persistent identity. A normal Deadite is usually an evil presence occupying a particular body. Evil Ash, however, is always specifically Evil Ash. He has a personality and a name that he chooses for himself almost immediately after his creation. Second, he retains a twisted version of Ash's mannerisms and behavior. He is recognizably Ash, just bent entirely towards evil. Yes, he has Deadite characteristics, and yes, he is Ash's supernatural duplicate, but he is more specific than either label alone suggests. His existence also feels purposeful, rather than being a simple case of an existing person becoming possessed. Many Deadites are created when the supernatural force overtakes whichever living or dead body it reaches. Evil Ash is closer to a constructed double, physically grown from Ash before later assuming command of the Army of Darkness. It's not all fun and games for Evil Ash, though. With extra power and elevated status comes some very human weaknesses. Evil Ash has inherited Ash's flaws along with his face. He's arrogant, he's overconfident, he's a preening show-off who would rather gloat and toy with his enemy than win immediately, giving the enemy more than enough time to launch a counterattack. A random Deadite might simply attack, but Evil Ash pauses to monologue, strut, and savor the moment. Those very human vanities are exactly the openings that the real Ash exploits. His ego is his Achilles heel, and this makes him such a well-rounded character that reducing him to a simple villain of the week feels inaccurate and unfair. He's Ash's foil, and there's even an argument to be made that he is one of the movie's most important characters. But that's another video, maybe. Let's get on with this one. Rotting Knight, physical anatomy and visual design. Practical effects have always been central to the fantastical elements of Sam Raimi's films, whether in Evil Dead or Spider-Man, and Evil Ash's final form is a triumph of exactly this. By the climax, he has shed the cloned look almost entirely and become a rotting knight. He has a skull-like face with large missing sections of flesh, sunken eye sockets, exposed teeth locked in a permanent grimace, and decaying tissue still clinging to bone. He's a corpse dressed for war, draped in medieval armor and a cloak, and carrying the weapons of a 14th century battlefield. The genius of the design is that we can still see Ash in him. His silhouette still resembles Ash. He has the same build, stance, and swagger. Whenever you see him, your brain initially registers Ash before correcting itself to, oh no, Evil Ash, because every surface detail screams undead. He is Ash, but catastrophically and completely wrong. The performance sells it just as powerfully as the makeup. Bruce Campbell, the icon of the series, plays both roles and threads recognizable Ash mannerisms into Evil Ash's behavior. The clone's movements feel disturbingly alive for a rotting corpse, rather than resembling the stiff shamble you might expect from a skeleton. He feels like a disgusting, decaying organism you could reach out and touch. There's also a fun bit of trivia associated with the performance. According to the DVD commentary, the skeletal form of Evil Ash during the climax was voiced by Sam Raimi rather than Bruce Campbell, giving the final form an extra layer of separation from the original Ash. There is also his power level, which goes hand in hand with his Deadite durability. Across the castle sequence, he endures blow after blow that should end him several times over. During the final confrontation, Ash fires flame-tipped arrows into Evil Ash, setting his decaying body on fire and burning away the remaining flesh until only his skeleton is left inside the armor. And you know what happens? He keeps fighting. By then, he is quite literally a moving skeleton, and it barely slows him down. Around him, the effects work extends to his entire army, with stop-motion and animatronic skeletons, miniature siege work, and puppetry all working together to show that Evil Ash is the head of a physical and coordinated Legion of the Dead. The Book and the Dark Ones, magic that keeps him alive. This applies to nearly every villain and every entry in the franchise, but for Evil Ash especially. You cannot understand him without understanding the object at the center of his existence, the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, also known as the Book of the Dead. In the context of Army of Darkness, it is an ancient tome bound in human flesh and inked in blood. It contains passages connected to summoning, awakening, and dispelling the forces of the dead, along with the knowledge required to return Ash to his own time. It is the source of the supernatural chaos, not just in this movie, but throughout the franchise, beginning with The Evil Dead in 1981 and continuing through the latest theatrical entry, Evil Dead Burn, released in July 2026. Again, just to point out the irony, Evil Ash's resurrection occurs because Ash mishandles the book. Ash doesn't mean to awaken the Army of Darkness, he is simply trying to retrieve the Necronomicon and return home. But the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and this is no different. Evil Ash's original creation occurs before Ash retrieves the book, but his resurrection and the awakening of the skeletal army happen after Ash fails to recite the required words correctly. Later franchise lore also connects the Dark Ones, ancient supernatural beings, with the creation and history of the Necronomicon. Evil Ash is not shown directly communicating with the Dark Ones in Army of Darkness, but he serves the same destructive purpose. He is the general who unites the scattered dead into a single, conquering force, creating exactly the kind of organized undead legion that the book's power can unleash. His goal throughout the second half of the film is singular and revealing. He wants the Necronomicon for himself. Oh, he definitely also wants to kill his goody two-shoes twin, but more than anything, he wants the book, and he lays siege to Lord Arthur's castle specifically to seize it. Just think about what might have happened if he had succeeded. A Deadite commander with Ash's cunning and the knowledge contained inside the Necronomicon could potentially have raised further armies, expanded the evil's influence, and transformed the fate of the entire age. To Ash, the book is his way home. In Evil Ash's hands, it could be a path towards apocalypse. Now that's a chilling what if. As for how Evil Ash keeps going, the film presents him as autonomous once he has been created and resurrected. He is not shown needing a continuous stream of magical energy from the Necronomicon to remain active. He was born from the supernatural curse, but he operates as his own agent, hunting the book to increase the power of the dead rather than merely to keep himself alive. Evil Ash does not appear to need the Necronomicon simply to exist. He wants it. That desire drives him along with the independence and absolute tenacity he inherited from Ash, only amplified and stripped of restraint. Siege of Castle Kandar. Reign of the Deadite King. I've always had a liking for battles set in medieval times, and this one is no different. Now, Evil Ash's reign has reached its peak as he leads the siege of Lord Arthur's castle. There's action and violence and all that, but what makes the sequence stand out is the way we see his tactical mind at work. This is no mindless charge of the kind people typically associate with Deadites. Evil Ash organizes a proper medieval assault. He makes use of everyone in his vast army. Skeletal infantry are hurled against the walls. Ladders are raised to scale the battlements. Siege engines and battering rams attack the defenses. Archers provide ranged support while mounted troops add to the scale of the assault. He commits his forces in an organized manner rather than relying entirely on one suicidal rush. It is the behavior of a commander who is actually thinking. And, of course, he laces the whole campaign with cruelty and flair, which are trademarks of his twisted personality. He taunts the real Ash across the battlefield while celebrating his own corrupted grandeur. He also uses Sheila, now transformed into his Deadite consort, to strike at Ash emotionally. It's warfare with a campy and sadistic theatrical side, entirely in keeping with the egotistical and flamboyant King of the Dead we've been dissecting. Not that the siege is an easy victory. On the other side is the human army, the Force for Good, rallied by Ash as their reluctant leader. The human defenders fight back with ingenuity, using gunpowder created from Ash's chemistry textbook, his modified death coaster, mounted crossbows, and sheer, desperate coordination. It's a good effort, but it initially isn't enough. Thankfully, when all hope appears lost, Gondor calls for aid. Duke Henry the Red arrives with his men to reinforce the castle, tipping the battle in the humans' favor. Evil Ash, though clearly frustrated, remains committed to reaching the Necronomicon even as the tide turns against his legion. In the final duel between the two Ashes, Evil Ash proves once more that he's no mere brute. He fights with timing, cleverness, weapons, and taunts, trading blows with Ash blade to blade. His aim is not to just kill Ash, it is also to seize the Necronomicon. He is dangerous until the last moment because he fights with his mind, just as much as he fights with his rotting but extremely durable body. But his destruction, because it does come, is one that sticks. You might not expect it because in this franchise we're used to shooting, cutting, and burying being used to deal with Deadites. During the final struggle, Evil Ash leaps from the castle parapet and lands on the firing arm of a catapult. A burning fuse is already approaching a satchel of black powder resting there. Ash cuts off the skeletal hand holding the Necronomicon, catches the book, and slices through the catapult's restraining rope. Evil Ash and the burning powder charge are launched over the castle wall together. The powder explodes in midair and blows his skeletal body apart. This achieves what the shotgun, the chainsaw, and the burial could not: complete physical destruction. The films repeatedly show that severed Deadite parts can remain active, meaning dismemberment alone does not always stop the evil immediately. The explosion does not merely wound Evil Ash, it scatters his skeletal form so completely that there is no intact body left to continue fighting or commanding the army. Again, you can't simply bury magic, but you can apparently launch it from a catapult and blow it into thousands of pieces. Beyond the Middle Ages, Evil Ash in games, comics, and television. I'm embarrassed to admit how relieved I was to see Evil Ash in other parts of the franchise because, frankly, he is far too compelling a concept to leave behind after one film. Thankfully, versions of the Evil Double idea have recurred throughout the expanded media. In the classic game Evil Dead: Hail to the King, Bad Ash returns as a major antagonist. The game carries forward the idea of Ash battling a corrupted reflection of himself, eventually placing the two versions of Ash in direct conflict again. Then you have the more recent Evil Dead the Game, where Evil Ash appears as the leader of the Necromancer demon class. He can command skeletons, summon additional troops, and strengthen his undead forces, allowing players to directly take control of the Deadite King and his army. But the comic books of the Evil Dead universe are where the concept really flourishes. The long-running Army of Darkness comics revisit both Evil Ash and the Mini-Ashes repeatedly. The little doppelgangers turn up again and again to torment Ash, sometimes merging into larger forms, sometimes appearing in S-Mart, and in one crossover, escaping with a miniature Necronomicon of their own. Though they be little, they are fierce, and they never stop coming after him. The Evil Double idea gets reused many times, but it rarely becomes boring because the basic concept of Ash's worst enemy being himself is a well that never seems to run dry. And Ash vs. Evil Dead, the Starz television series, while it doesn't bring back the exact skeletal Evil Ash from the year 1300, leans heavily into echoes of the same idea. Ash is repeatedly forced to confront corrupted, demonic, or duplicated versions of himself, with his flaws and his past actions thrown back at him in monstrous form. The series understood that what made Evil Ash compelling wasn't just the campy villain energy or the practical effects, it was the direct confrontation with one's own darkest traits and impulses. Evil Ash is what happens when supernatural evil uses Ash's body, mannerisms, and worst qualities as a raw material for a leader. It's a fear almost everyone understands, made literal in Army of Darkness. Anatomy of a Dark Reflection. What Evil Ash says about Ash. Evil Ash can try to be more than what he was made to be, but from his name to his purpose, he remains Ash's dark mirror. He represents everything that Ash, heroic, tragic, and valiant Ash, could become. Look at which of Ash's traits he amplifies: the towering ego, the mockery, the selfishness, the casual cruelty, and the need to dominate and gloat. These qualities aren't invented from nothing. They are already present in the good Ash, the arrogant S-smart clerk who calls the medieval villagers primitive screwheads and struts around chainsaw first. Evil Ash simply takes those existing flaws and cranks them to their monstrous maximum, while removing the qualities that balance them out. There is no heroism, kindness, or genuine bravery here. The film never explicitly says that the Necronomicon consciously selected Ash's body as the ideal template for an army commander. Evil Ash's physical creation also happens before Ash mishandles the book at the cemetery. Thematically, however, it is significant that the leader of the Army of Darkness looks and behaves exactly like the man who was prophesied to defeat it. It couldn't be just another hulking Deadite or nameless demonic spirit. For the story to work, it had to be Ash, or rather, a twisted version of him. On one level, that is because he is the dark counterpart of the Promised One. On another level, it means that the qualities making Ash such an effective survivor, including his ruthlessness, ego, and willingness to do brutal things, are the same qualities that could make his evil counterpart a dangerous tyrant. That's genuinely frightening, because Ash is supposed to be the franchise's hero, the one everyone can count on, and yet a version of him becomes one of the greatest threats to humanity. The monster is not literally a hidden personality waiting inside Ash, but it is constructed from recognizable parts of him. The windmill sequence simply gives those qualities a separate body. This raises the stakes like almost nothing before it, because if Ash ever abandoned the remaining limits imposed by his conscience, he might look completely different from the monster standing opposite him. That reframes the final duel entirely. When Ash blows Evil Ash apart, he isn't just defeating an enemy. Symbolically, he is also rejecting the path that could turn his survival instinct, confidence, and brutality into outright tyranny. He sees the worst version of himself made literal and chooses, violently, not to become it. So that's a wrap for our dissection of Evil Ash, the Deadite King. Born from a mirror's reflection, a swallowed miniature clone, and a grotesque second body emerging from Ash's shoulder, Evil Ash is killed, dismembered, buried, resurrected by a fumbled incantation, and ultimately crowned commander of a rotting medieval army. And all of that is just his origin story, so imagine what might happen if this arc had unfolded across multiple films. Thankfully, we have the games and comics to give us more of him, because one movie isn't enough. I'll tell you that right now. He is just too interesting. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Is Evil Ash the most terrifying Deadite in the entire franchise? I mean, just look at his powers, his army, his durability, and his ability to keep fighting even after being reduced to a skeleton. I would definitely side-eye you if you simply said no without explaining why. Or maybe you think he's the most terrifying because of what he represents, the possibility that the hero might only be one terrible decision, one surrendered impulse, or one swallowed clone away from becoming the monster himself. Either you die a hero, as the quote goes, or you live long enough to become the villain. That quote applies to Ash surprisingly well. Drop your verdict in the comments, and I'll see you next time for the next dissection.